All right, so today we're going to talk about front ends. I also want to mention that, was it 2 weeks ago now? Last week, I did a session on dashboarding. So if you're interested in doing like more of a dashboard kind of front end, that will be in that recording. There is one that I'll show you how to incorporate a dashboard into this kind of front end. That'll be later today, but if you're just doing a dashboard by itself, much easier is the way that I talked about last week or the week before. When was it? It was last week. Okay. So to get started, I had sent you all this zip file to your Slack channels, last week, which is flask-demo, which has 3 different front ends in it. So Dash is the one that I talked about last week. And today I'm going to talk about these 2, Flask app and Flask with Dash. So to start up any of these, either of these, I'm going to show you how to do that. Let me zoom in on my terminal real quick. Just CD into the specific one. I'm going to start with Flask app, CD into it. And for Flask, the code to start it up, and I'll also send all of this information to your Slack channel later, is Flask app equals to app.py Flask run. So when you run this, and it should have all the data in there, so you'll be able to successfully run this as well. When you run this, this local URL will pop up. Copy and paste that up there, and this is a Flask app. So this is just like a fun project that I did a couple years ago, basically text classifier. In the backend, what I have here is just an NLP classification model. And how it works is I just input some raw text here. So let's just say, I don't know, data science right now, submit, and it will give me a classification result. And then I have another link to classify another. So I can keep doing this over and over again. Also hyperlink to my GitHub, and I'll show you all how I made this. So to start a Flask app, I do highly recommend not starting from scratch. Feel free to take mine and just edit it to make it your own. But before that, I want you all to think about your project and think about what components you're actually using in your front end. Like in this case, none of the data cleaning matters. None of the EDA matters. It's solely just the process of making a prediction. And so what I want you all to think about is scripting. So in scripting, here I'm doing my text classification model. What are the parts of the code that I use to build this model that I need to make a brand new prediction? So in this case, you can see I have like a bunch of different things here. I have like some NLTK stuff. I have like my lematizer here. Other things that I have a pickle file for my TF-IDF vectorizer, because I'm going to need to use TF-IDF to process my brand new text. I actually also made like a custom list of relevant words that I wanted to use. And this is my naive Bayes model that is all saved into pickle files from my Jupyter notebook. Just turn them into pickle files and I load them in this script. So what is this script for? This script is supposed to be able to take in, or some part of this script, and you can see here there's like, I should not have done this. I don't know why I did this, but there's pretty much like 2 to 3 functions that are able to take raw text and classify it using your model. So what I have here, this final function called classify text, let me zoom in a little bit more. This final function known as classify text is able to take in my raw text. You can see that it loads up my naive Bayes model. It pre-processes it, and pre-processing is here. I'm lemmatizing it. I am filtering out the stop words as well, throwing it through my TF-IDF, run that through your model, and then you return a result. And this result is literally going to be 0 or 1. In this case, I did a binary classification. It's going to return 0 or 1. So once I have this, basically from this, actually, you should be able to run your model in your command line, which is actually something that I haven't really talked about yet. But this is my command line. I can actually do Python -i, that means Python interactive app.py. app.py because this is the file that app.py is. And -I basically lets me interact with this file. So basically when I've done Python I app.py, it has run all of these things. So what that means is if I do classify text and I use this function, hopefully this works. And I do like data science as an example. Ooh, let's see what happened there. Hold on, where did it go? Oh, here, it printed out 0. These are all warnings, but it printed out 0. So basically it classified it as 0 or 1. So cool. So this is just a bunch of functions that will do your pre-processing and your predicting that you will feed into some of your front end code. So that's the first file that you probably want to make. I would say test your functions in Jupyter Notebook to just make sure that they work. And then this should be all set up. The next thing you have to start doing is your app. So here I have app.py. You should just call it app.py because it's your web app. And there's a couple of different things going on here. All of this stuff at the start, similar to last time, I'm not 100% sure what it does, but you just need it there. And then this stuff at the very end, if name equals main app.run, that just helps you run your app. Here you can see that there's a bunch of app routes. What an app route means is you see how these are just like slashes. So if these are just slashes and these are the app routes, it just means like, at the end of a base URL / whatever, this is basically the home page. And I'll talk about this a little bit. I defined a new app route here where it's /test and it just returns, hi, this is a test. If I do /test, you can see that here really tiny, it says, hi, this is a test. So that basically defines like all the different pages on your website. So if potentially you want to have multiple things going on your web app, you can do that. Maybe you want to have like all your different projects on one single web app, you can actually do that as well. So let's talk about what this is. So for this app route of, just the home page, which is just /, I actually have 2 here because I wanted to render my result on the same page address. So therefore I have to do this twice. What I'm using here is this Flask method known as render template. So what it's doing is when you get to this page, it's going to render a specific HTML template. I'll talk about HTML template and how I set this up to look that way in a little bit. But this happens twice. So when I first go onto the page where I get my information, get my input, therefore the method here is a get method. Where I'm getting it, it's going to render this classifier template. And then after I fill out this form and press submit, where I post my outputs, it's actually going to run my classified text function from my other script. So as you can see here, from functions import star, because I basically imported my functions from here, imported those, got the text from my get, which I'll walk through in a little bit as well. But then you can see here, I'm using my classified text function. And if prediction is 0, render this template. If prediction is 1, render that template. That's what render template's doing. It's going to render a bunch of HTML templates. First, I'm going to talk about what an HTML template looks like. I am by no means an HTML expert, so it's actually very, very simple, my code. So let's look at the first one, which is classifier.html. And I'm just going to put this kind of side by side with this to explain what each part refers to. So let me make this a little bit smaller. So in any HTML file, there are 2 main parts. There's the head and there is the body. So you can sort of see how HTML is structured. I'm going to zoom in and out in a little bit, but HTML, you can see this is where the head starts and the head ends here. So this entire thing that I've highlighted is the head. And in the head of an HTML, that's where you define a lot of metadata. So as an example, these are all stuff that was already there. I also took this from some template. The first thing that we have here that's kind of relevant is the title. So the title is, at the top of the tab, what shows up as the name of your site. That's what title is. Here I also you can define some like default styles. These are all default styles really. And then that's all that's in the head, just like metadata, nothing that shows up on the page itself. So that you can pretty much take, maybe just change the title, change your colors if you want. This just means that for every H1, use this color, every H3, use this color. Just find some like color palette and choose hex codes. Okay, so the body, this website is literally just this. It's just these lines. So as you can see here, I have an H1 of my title over here, an H4 of my subtitle here. I literally embedded a GIF from Giphy here, and then more words for my H3. HTML does go top to bottom. What other things do I have? I have a form that takes in my raw text with a submit button. And then finally, I have a link to my GitHub here. So pick and choose which elements you want to keep. You can also rearrange these, change the colors up. But yeah, it's actually very simple. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different things on this page. The most important thing though, is this form, because this form is where you take in the input. So here you can see that this form, the method is post because you're posting your inputs. I actually don't know exactly what these mean, but this is what works. And here you can see I'm taking in a text input and then a submit button here. So for taking in any input, you need to have a form. Other important things to note that are related to this HTML code is if I go back to my app, it's getting text. So how does it recognize what the input is and how does it translate the input to that other page that comes up after I press submit? You have to get text. So this text has to match the name here. So the name text has to match that post method from my app. So those things have to match. So after that, I grab my raw text, run it through the classifier, and then render a different template. So as an example, again, let's say data science. Okay, this is another HTML template. This is my Nope template. So actually it's a lot of the same stuff. The only difference is the head is actually all exactly the same. Here's actually less stuff. There is an H3 here, an H1 here, and then a GIF here, and then classify another down here. The important thing, how does it know to keep the input? Sometimes it's important to keep the input there. It actually sees it as variable here. And it knows that it's variable because if I look into app.py, variable is equal to text, and text comes from here. Variable is actually something that you can change the name of. So let's say you want to say it called like input equals text. Then on the HTML here, they'll say input equals to text. And then, yeah, of course, you can edit this HTML however you like that matches, your desired output. So other things to note, every HTML template should belong in a templates folder. That's just by default how Flask learns to render templates. Other than that, let's see. Yeah, there's something else I'll talk about that later. You don't have to worry about all these other files. All of these other files basically come in when I want to take this website and put it, or this web app and put it on the internet, on the website. And I'll be sending out instructions for that. Those instructions will guide you through it much better than I can explain. But this is a Flask app. I think that this kind of app is probably the best if you have a fairly straightforward machine learning problem where you want to predict categories. You can even do regression here as well. Just instead of outputting 2 different pages, maybe you have one page that changes based on the input. So yeah, if you just have like a fairly straightforward machine learning process that you want to walk through, recommend Flask app. questions at this point? All right. Okay, so this is Flask. I know there's a lot of information. I do think that if you are planning on doing something like this, oh yeah, Russ.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. You know, not to be critical, but it seems very basic. This would be only for like demonstration purposes. It wouldn't be as fancy for like user interface or anything. I can't do this. It's better than me, but I'm just saying.
Absolutely, yes. This is really just so that, as data scientists, we very rarely have to work in the front end space. So, just having skills to do something very basic to showcase that your model can work,
Gotcha.
I think is good enough. So of course you can get fancy. I have had students who have experience with HTML, CSS, fancy JavaScript.
Get real fancy. Yeah.
Yeah, but I honestly am not very familiar with HTML, CSS myself. This is fairly basic.
Gotcha. Okay. I just want to make sure that it's more just for demo purposes.
Yes.
To test your code and whatnot.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say the only front end that is like fairly close to what you would see in industry is actually what I spoke about last week with the dashboarding. Those dashboards you can actually, via documentation make look really nice. And a lot of companies actually do use Dash as their dashboards. So yeah, but Flask, yeah, this HTML stuff doesn't look very pretty. I fully agree with that. Okay, so let me pull up the other one. I have this Python open, so I'm going to exit that. And then I also want to exit out of my Flask app. That's good. And let's go take a look at the other one. So I'm going to look into Flask with Dash. So Flask with Dash is basically a combination of Flask and also what I did last week. So it's how you can incorporate both of those into a singular website. Just to show the example, the way that you run this one is actually Python run.py. I'll post all of the commands into Slack so that you have somewhere to reference. Because to be honest, I also just Googled this right before this session. So very similarly, when you have your Python run.py, something will come up. This is an extremely simple version where I just have like a single graph. The same code will go. You can copy and paste whatever Jupyter Dash thing you did into here. It will also work. But this just for demonstration purposes, very simple graph. But you can see here, this is could be a dashboard. I always forget to add a hyperlink, but I meant to add a hyperlink somewhere here to go to /model. There we go. So this was actually my phase 3 project. At the time, I did not have to make this, but when I was like graduated, I decided to do this. So this is my phase 3 NLP classification project. And basically it's a classifier very similar to the last front end that I showed you all. Whether it is more art or more programming, you can see there's a link to the dashboard here. I can do like, I don't know, data science. And here you can see that it is a programming one. If I classify another, maybe I just literally look at art, it is an art piece of text. So even though this is just, the 2 different kinds of front ends that we've seen so far put together, it is much more complicated in the back end. So I'll show you what the back end looks like. So let's go CD here, CD Flask with Dash, and let me show you all the code for that. The trickiest part with this is truly the file structure. Let me pull up the file structure. I don't know why it has to be like this. This is something that I got off of Dash's documentation. But Flask with Dash, you'll see here that when I click into that, there's a run.py, which is how you run the app. Earlier, you ran Python run.py, so it's actually launching it through run.py. This markdown doesn't matter. This is actually, if you want to see notes on Flask, I have them all written there. But let's see, not important for right now. But we have this Dash package. And for some reason, they want everything that is relevant to your site to be in this Dash package folder. So within Dash package, I'm going to be talking about each of these files. So the first one that we're going to talk about is that run.py. I don't understand the file structure either, but just know that you have to have this run.py here. It imports the app and it basically runs your app. Next thing I want to talk about within the dash package, the first thing I want to talk about is the init file. You have to have this init file. Also not sure why they've decided to do it this way, but I want to point out that here you are importing Flask and Dash. You set up your Flask server, and your URL-based path name is basically the path to your dashboard. So as you can see here in my terminal, where's my terminal? In my terminal here, when it had launched, the URL gave me /dash. So therefore, this was the page that had my dashboard on it. So this one basically. And then also imported the roots. So roots, pretty much the same as what we talked about earlier. If you take a look at the roots, it's slightly different. It's actually app.server.root for some reason. Or is that this? Anyways, app.server.root. I have the dash, and for the dashboard page, you just have to return this. Just return app.index, and that will render whatever your dashboard was. The dashboard is defined in the dashboard file. So there's a lot of files going on. You're going to be back and forth among all these files, but the dashboard file, this is basically all of the code that you would have done for Jupyter Dash. You just copy and paste your Jupyter Dash into here, it will work. So dashboard.py has your Jupyter Dash, and that is how routes for /dash can run your dashboard. Kind of similar to before, I have this /model, exactly the same as I was talking about before. It needs like that get and the post. My HTMLs, as you can see, my HTMLs are pretty much exactly the same. I just replaced the GIFs with like pictures. So there's that. The classified text function, I actually use exactly the same functions for both these projects. And also another one to show that you can create more routes if you like. If you want to have like an about me page or like about this project page, you can do that as well. So if I do like /hello, you can have that there. So that's what routes is. The next thing I wanted to talk about is for the HTML. Yes. So within the HTML, in this situation, I'm not getting a GIF from the internet. Rather, I'm just using my own images. For some reason, if you want to have like images on your Flask site, they have to belong inside a static folder. That's just how it has to be. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why it wasn't working, but it has to be inside a folder called static. So any images that you want on your Flask site have to be in this static folder. Similar to that, like the templates are all in a templates, your HTML templates are in an HTML templates folder. And other than that, these are junk files, so we actually don't need these. Same as before. Oh, did I just delete something I wasn't supposed to? Oh, okay, no, I'm okay. All right. Let's see. What was I talking about? Right, yeah. So similar to before, I have the same functions file where I'm defining all of my pre-processing functions. This is where you have to think about, okay, what vectorizer, what preprocessors, what models am I going to use? But yeah, for this kind of front end, the hardest part is the file structure and having all the files communicate with each other. As you can see here, I'm importing a lot of different things everywhere. My tip, especially if you've never run anything from Dash or from Flask before, if you try and launch this app, this specific app, if you take my file and try and open it up, it will give you module not found error, probably. So if you get this module not found error, just whatever it says that cannot be found, just do pip install whatever, or conda install whatever, and it'll just install that, and you should be eventually able to run this. But yeah, any questions? I know this has been like a lot of like information that's very new and very different from what we were doing with data science. This is really something that not a requirement for the capstone to pass, by the way. Something that I did spend like building this. I did spend like a good month maybe just sitting down and putting the pieces together slowly debugging, which is why I do recommend that if you do want to do this, just take my code and edit it to be your own. And I'm 100% okay with that, because a lot of my code does come from other places as well. But yeah, so I would say at this point, probably the first steps that you should be thinking of doing if you want to move towards a front end is getting your functions in order. Even if you're defining your functions within your Jupyter notebook to test them to see if they work, that is your very, very first step. To make sure that they do work, try and take these functions, put them in a separate Jupyter notebook, and are they able to run all the tasks that you want your front end to be able to do without relying on, all of the other code in your Jupyter notebook. So it might show you that, okay, maybe I need to define more functions for these processes, this like pre-processing step, cleaning steps, so on and so forth. So this is a very long process for me. So I think it's good to like spend the time. It's annoying at first, but I think you slowly get to appreciate like how front ends are. But yeah, again, also happy to help answer and debug if needed at all, anytime. But yeah, that's all I have for these front ends. Do y'all have any questions regarding front end at this moment?
Just a lot of reviewing probably because it was so much information.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Usually I like send these like this zip file out and I just tell students just like, okay, just look through everything, try and like maybe add comments in the files to like say like, okay, this is what. I think that'll be helpful. And then yeah, it's a slow process of getting it to work the way that you want it to.
Yeah, I think I'd have more questions during our one-on-one on Tuesday, just because how it relates to my project. I don't know if I'm too far along where I can't do this, but I'd like to sort of turn my project into something like that where I can put in, okay, here's one team, here's the other, here's the down and distance, what's the likely results. Yeah, so I talked with Amber about that when I originally pitched the project, but I'm just wondering with how I already joined the data all together with all of the teams, if it's possible to sort of separate two teams out of it.
Absolutely, we'll talk about it on Tuesday.
Okay.
Sweet. Let's see, let me just stop the recording so we don't have this all in the video.